Before we draw a cube from observation, let's go through the step-by-step process we're going to use. We're going to start by drawing the front edge of the cube. The front edge of the cube is going to be represented by a vertical line. That line can be as long and short as you want, depending on how big you draw the cube. The next step is to use our angle measuring tool to measure the right and left top front angles. Now that we've drawn the top front angles, we're going to do the same thing for the bottom two angles using our angle measuring tool. When you draw the bottom two angles, you will notice that they're going to be slightly steeper, slightly more angled than the top front angles. This is because the faces of the cube are getting smaller as they're going back in space, which makes the angles that you're drawing taper towards each other slightly. Now that we've drawn the top and bottom two angles, we're going to switch over to the proportion measuring tool to determine the length of the sides, where the sides of the cube on the right and left side end. Now that we've drawn the sides, the last step is to switch back to our angle measuring tool and measure the back two angles. When you measure them, you'll realize that the back two angles are slightly flatter than the front two angles. Once again, this is because the sides of the cube are receding back in space, and all three angles, the one in the front, the one in the bottom, and the one in the back, will taper towards each other. Now we're going to use all the tools in our measuring arsenal to draw our first object, a cube. Now, my apologies, this cube arrived in the mail with some dents in it, but pretend like the corners are really nice and sharp. Okay, so step one is to draw the front corner of our cube. That's going to be a vertical line. Now, here's something really, really important. Notice my grip. I'm using the thumb and forefinger grip, and I'm going to put down a very, very light line. I don't want to commit to my line. And then notice that I'm going over it a few times to make sure that the line is perfectly straight. When you're drawing a vertical line, check your verticals against the edge of your paper. How do you do that? Hold your pencil up against the edge of your paper, which is vertical, if you weren't aware, and then bring the pencil back to the line you've drawn. Make sure the two things are parallel. So always check the verticality of your lines. All right, so here is where the bottom of your cube is going to be. Here's the top of the cube. Now we're going to measure out the front top angles using which measuring tool? Our angle measuring tool, of course. So let's move back to the cube. Hold your pencil vertical. Never lean in. Always straight up and down. Then I'm going to rotate my pencil until it lines up with the angle on the right. And then I'm going to drop it down to my paper. Place the back of your pencil at the very top of the cube and put a little dot where the angle needs to go, and then you can connect your dots. Again, make sure that you guys are sketching. Work really light. This is a 6B pencil. I'm living dangerously. And this is a Tombow, so this is actually considerably softer than other brands. So this might be the equivalent of an 8B. So I'm a risk taker right now. But because I'm holding my grip way back like this, it allows me just to barely put pressure down on the pencil and create a really light stroke. This is sketching. I'm sketching in my form before committing to a darker line. All right, so we've got this angle. Cross-check your information. Line up your pencil with the angle you've just drawn, and then bring it back up to make sure that the angle is the same. Okay, so I'm pretty certain that this angle is correct. Now let's get the other angle. Hold your pencil against the angle on the left, ignore the dent, and then drop it down. Put the back of your pencil, a little hard to see, right? The back of the pencil goes to the top of the line, and then I'm going to mark off a little line that represents where the angle needs to go, and then I'm going to connect the dots. You guys see this? Okay. Work light, people. Work very, very light. Do not commit. All right, so now we've measured out the top front angles. We're going to do the same thing for the bottom two angles. Right, so that's going to be the angle going here and the angle going here. Angle measuring tool. Line up my pencil with the bottom and then drop it down. Back of the pencil goes to the bottom of the line. Make a little dot and connect your lines. Connect your dots together. Right? Just let the line build up a little bit. This kind of fuzzy line at the beginning is fine. Again, this is sketching. This is sketching. By the way, when you hold your pencil way back like this, you actually get better control over larger movements. You're better able to draw a straight line as opposed to using the writer's grip. All right, now let's do the same thing with the bottom angle on the left side. Drop it up. My angle changed. Don't let your angles change. Okay, mark off a spot. And, oh, did I mark it off? I didn't do it. Let's do that again. There we go. Okay, and draw a line. Hold the pencil way back. Don't worry if the line is completely crooked. I'm trying to hold the phone and draw at the same time. Not easy. Not easy. Okay. All right. We've got the top angles. We've got the bottom angles. Now, here's a question for you. What is the difference between the top angle and the bottom angle? If I hold my pencil to the top angle and then drop it down without moving it to the bottom angle, you'll see that the bottom angle is a little bit steeper than the top angle on both sides. Look here. Oh. Do you see how the bottom angle is a little bit steeper? All right, so the rule for bottom angles is bottoms up. Bottoms up. Bottoms up. Whatever the top front angle is, the bottom angle is going to be a little bit more steep. Think like a mountain, right? This is flatter, steeper, 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 steeper. Whatever the front top angle is on the left side, the bottom one is going to be steeper, steeper, steeper. By how much? It depends how close you are to the cube. If you're really close, the difference between the top and the bottom is going to be pretty great. 20 degrees. If you're really close to the cube, it's going to be very slight. I'm sorry, really far away from the cube, it's going to be really, really slight. There's always going to be a difference, however, because on a cube, the angles can never be parallel. So I'm going to try drawing angles that are parallel. Okay. Here is a cube with parallel angles, top and bottom. To a beginner, this might actually look okay, but basically what you're saying here when you're drawing a cube with parallel angles is that the cube is not getting smaller. It's not tapering as it's going back in space, this way and this way. In effect, what you're drawing here is a cube that's getting larger as it's going back in space. It's incorrect. And before you become sensitive to it, you might look at a cube like this and go, there's something off about it, I'm not even sure what. But now that you have been initiated into the mysteries of the cube, or will be anyway, you'll start looking at cubes like this and see exactly what's wrong. Right? Bottoms up. Whatever this angle is, the bottom angle needs to be a little bit steeper. Whatever this angle is, the bottom angle needs to be a little bit steeper. Why? Because this face of the cube needs to shrink this way. This face of the cube needs to shrink that way. Okay. We have the front corner. We've got the top angles. We've got the bottom angles. The next step is to figure out where the back two corners are, where this edge is and where this edge is. Now, this is something that quite often is eyeballed. You can do it as you get more advanced, to just look at a width and eyeball it. But for right now, I want all of us to use our other measuring tool. I gave it away. The proportion measuring tool. All right, let's use a proportion measuring tool. Here's how we're going to use it. The tip of my pencil, you guys see the tip of my pencil, lines up with the front corner of the cube. Then I'm going to slide my thumb back and forth until it lines up with the cube on the opposite side, right? So I've just taken a measurement from here to here. Always measure at a horizontal, everybody. That's supposed to be horizontal. I'm trying to draw through the camera. All right, so I'm measuring across this way, not this way. So once again, tip of the pencil goes to the front edge, thumbnail slides back and forth until it lines up with the right side of the cube. All right, now I'm going to compare this side, the width of this side, against the height of the cube. I'm going to rotate my arm. Slide back so I can actually do this. Okay. So let's redo that. Okay, boom. And now I'm going to compare that to the height of the cube. Do you see how the tip of my pencil is a little more than halfway up the cube. So the tip of my pencil runs right about here. Let's do that again. Tip of my pencil goes to the front edge, thumbnail goes to the other side. Then I rotate my arm, bring my arm down so that my thumbnail lines up with the bottom corner of the cube. Then I look up and see where the tip of my pencil is. It looks like it's a little bit past the middle of the front edge of the cube. Then I'm going to find that part, that little spot on my drawing. So that looks like it's going to be right about here, like that. Then I'm going to use my pencil to take that distance and carry it over. Now, if I had my other hand, I would place my finger there, right? So I'm just going to remember that spot. It's right here. I'm going to draw another vertical line. That's where my cube ends. Okay? Let's do the same thing for the opposite side. In this case, the tip of my pencil goes to the left side of the cube, and then my thumbnail goes to the front edge. Then I'm going to compare that against the height of the cube. It looks like it's also a little bit past the halfway point, at about the same spot. So let's find that spot on the front edge. Take your pencil, find that distance. Let's do that. And then carry that distance over and mark off the spot. So we've just used the proportion measuring tool to figure out how wide the cube needs to be. Okay, we're getting a little bit of distortion here. Always, right, when you're drawing a vertical line, check your vertical against the edge of your paper. Keep checking your verticals. Okay, almost done. Last step, I need to get the back two angles, these two angles. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to hold my pencil up to the back angle and then drop it down. Right, so the back of my pencil lines up with this corner, and then I make a little point and connect the dots. This way. Let's do the same thing for the other side. Bring it down and mark off a little spot. And draw another line. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of distortion because of the way I'm holding the camera. You see my verticals are more or less straight. Okay, now here's a question. What's the difference between this angle and this angle? What's the difference between the top front angle and the top back angle? You see they're very similar to each other? They're not the same though. Hold your pencil up against the back angle and then move it over to your front angle. You'll see that your back angle is a little bit flatter, a little bit less steep than the front angle. Let's take a look at this one. What's the difference between this angle and this angle? Hold your pencil up against the back angle, move it down to the front angle. You'll see that your back angle is a little tiny bit flatter. So the rule of back angles is backs down. Backs down. Back angles, the two back angle in the cube, this angle and this angle, are slightly flatter, less steep than the front angles. Okay? Again, this has to do with the fact that the cube is getting smaller as it's going back in space, so that the angle in the front, the angle in the bottom, and the angle in the back will eventually converge, get smaller and smaller and smaller until they touch. And the same thing is going to happen this direction, right? This angle and this angle and this angle eventually need to converge and touch a single spot. This is called two-point perspective. That's something we're going to cover later in the class. Okay, I've got my cube sketched in. Now I can sneak my fingers a little bit further up the grip, so they're way back here. And now I can put in a slightly stronger line. This is something you do only after you can see your cube has been sketched in correctly. So I'm trying to hold the camera still and draw at the same time. Not easy. There we go. Okay. only commit to your drawing once you're absolutely certain it's accurate. The more complex the drawing, the more sketching you really have to do. Right? I don't really know any artist who does a really complicated work. Okay, there's a few brilliant savants who are able to draw with perfect accuracy from the very beginning without sketching at all. I don't know how to do it. I'm assuming with some kind of computer trickery. Okay, so there's your cube. Let's see if we can see it without distortion. Up. I'm pretty close. Okay, so my cube has some damage. I'm going to send it back and complain to the post office. Okay, so that's our first cube. Now we're going to see what this cube looks like under a few different rotations. All right, now let's draw a cube in a slightly different rotation. So here we can see a lot more of the right side of the cube and a lot less of the left side of the cube. The process is going to be exactly the same though. We're going to start by drawing a vertical line. It's going to be like this. Again, make sure you're sketching. So don't put down a heavy line. Check your vertical against the edge of your paper. Boom, boom. Then step 2, measure the top 2 angles. So I've got a little sketch here. I'm measuring this angle and this angle. Let's use our angle measuring tool. Drop it down, mark off a spot, and sketch in a line. Let's do the same thing for the other side. Again, make sure that your pencil is not leaning into the angle. That's very common when you're trying to draw some kind of angle that's going back in space. Don't lean into it. Hold your pencil straight up and down like the hand of a clock. Okay. So notice that our angles now are not mirroring each other, that the angle on this side is a lot flatter than the angle on that side. That happens to be the case when you're drawing a cube with different sides that's rotated in such a way that you can see more of one side than the other. The angles on the larger side are always going to be a little bit flatter. The angles on the shorter side, this side, are always going to be a little bit steeper. All right. Now let's draw the bottom 2 angles. Drop it down. Don't forget to make the bottom angle a little bit steeper than the top angle. Whoop, there we go. A little bit steeper. I'm trying to draw through the camera. Not easy. Okay. Always make a comparison. Line up your pencil with the top angle, drop it down to the bottom angle. The bottom angle should be a little bit steeper. If you drew them the same, you've drawn something wrong. Recheck your information and make sure that the bottom angle is a little bit steeper. I'm trying to, once again, draw through the camera. I'm going to make the adjustment a little bit. This is why it's so important to sketch. Now, if your lines have built up a little bit too much, you can always take your little kneaded eraser and lighten them. Don't erase them completely. Right? Up. Okay, there we go. All right, let's do the same for the smaller side. You'll notice that the angle difference on the smaller side is going to be much greater. So on this side, it's a difference of a few degrees, barely visible, right? On this side, it's going to be really visible, a difference of, it could be as much as, 15 degrees. Up, right between this and this. Okay. Now notice I've extended my angles out quite a lot. I don't know where they need to end. They're definitely not going to end here. But they're going to probably end here somewhere. I don't know where yet because I haven't measured the sides yet. So that's the next step. We've got our top 2 angles, bottom 2 angles. Now let's measure the width of the larger side using our proportion measuring tool, of course. Tip of the pencil goes to the front edge. Thumbnail goes to the other side. Then I rotate my pencil, and I notice that I'm trying to not move my body when I do this. Let's try that again. Hard to film and measure at the same time. Okay, so boom. And notice that the width across falls a little tiny bit short of the height. So that's going to be right about here on the height of the cube. Take your pencil, and I guess I can do something like this, right? Measure it off that way. Let's see. Boom. Boom. Okay, again, hard to hold the camera and draw at the same time. So, okay. And that's a mistake. Let's erase it. Okay. Everybody, when you're drawing a cube, the width of the side could be almost the same as the height, but it can never be longer. Okay? Squares, cubes have square faces, but the square face is getting smaller this way, right? It's shrinking a little bit. Hence, the width here is going to be a little bit shorter than the height here. Okay? You'll never have something longer because if you do, that means you're no longer drawing a cube. It means you're drawing some kind of brick shape, a cuboid. Okay, let's go for the smaller side. Tip of the pencil goes to your left side, thumbnail goes to the front edge. Let's do that, and let's compare. Okay, so it looks like the tip of my pencil runs to right about here, like this. So easier to do this side than the other side. Go like that. Up, drawing through my phone. Okay, and mark off that spot. Okay, don't forget to work light. Your sketch should be almost like a ghost. So I'm working a little bit darker because I want you to see it. But under normal conditions, the line should look like this, really ghostly. And by the way, again, I'm working with a 6B pencil. You should be starting off with your HB pencil. So do all your sketches with your HB, and then once you're confident your drawing is correct, move to your 2B, your 4B, 6B if you're feeling adventurous. Okay, pretty close. Now let's get the back two angles. So now we're gonna go for this angle and this angle. Let's do it. Drop it down, mark off the spot, and draw your angle up like that. Let's do the same thing here. Drop it down, mark off the spot, and draw an angle. If you remember, the rule for the back angles is back down, meaning that whatever this angle is, it needs to be a little flatter than this angle. So it is, I got it. Whatever this angle is, the back angle needs to be a little bit flatter, right? These two angles need to be a little bit flatter than your front angles. Make sure you check that. So besides rechecking your angle like this and bringing it back up to make sure it's the same, I moved my angle, okay, yeah, more or less the same. More or less the same. Also compare your angles against your other angles. These two angles need to be flatter, less steep than these angles. All right, now that I'm confident that my cube is drawn correctly, I've got my verticals, then, by the way, you can always switch to your writer's grip. That's also legit. You can finish your cube with a writer's grip, or switch to a darker pencil and keep using the thumb and forefinger grip. Sorry to be moving the camera. Hopefully I don't cause seasickness for anybody with my camera movements. And then you can erase the extra lines. Okay, so now we have a cube that is rotated in a different way, right? More of this side, less of this side. All right, let's do one more rotation. Okay, the rotation on this cube is a little bit hard to see because we see mostly the front side and a little bit of the side plane kind of sticking out like this, right? Okay, let's draw it. The process again is the same. I start off by drawing a vertical line like that, right? Then what's the next step? Draw the front two angles. The front angle here is going to be very flat. It's going to be very flat. It's going to look like, if I can draw it accurately, kind of like this, right? It's not going to be perfectly horizontal though, right? There's going to be one rotation where the lines are horizontal, but here's the key. If you're seeing 1, 2, 3 sides of a cube, that tells you that those sides cannot be horizontal. The angles on those sides cannot be horizontal. They have to be tipping up, Now, it could be almost horizontal, but not quite. But it's going to be slightly off horizontal. Okay, now let's do the other side. A little bit hard to see through the camera, but we've got a very steep angle here. Very, very steep. It's going to be an angle that looks like this. Here, I'm trying to draw through the camera. Okay. Now the bottom two angles. The bottom angle on the cube is also going to be almost horizontal, not quite, and a little tiny bit steeper than the top angle by half a degree, by 2 degrees. Something very, very slight. The difference between the top and bottom angle here is going to be pretty great. It might be pretty extreme. Let's see. Yeah, really extreme. You can see the difference of, right, 30 degrees, possibly. Okay, now let's measure the sides. Use your proportion measuring tool. Boom, boom. Okay, so I noticed that the side here is almost all the way up to the corner. Almost, not quite. Right? We're still seeing 3 sides, which means that the sides of the cube are always going to fall ever so slightly short of the height here. Now, the shorter side is very, very small. Let's take a measurement of it. Let's compare that to the height. It looks like it comes out to right about here, like that. Let's do that. Okay, almost done. Check your verticals. Make sure your verticals are straight, straight, straight. And now let's draw the back 2 corners. Back's down, right? The back angle needs to be slightly flatter than the front angle. And this angle is going to be very steep, but not as steep as this angle. Okay, so I've got it sketched in. Now I can go in and put in a sharper line. Okay, let's do one more rotation and then we'll be done with the cube demo. When looking at a cube directly from the front, the process is slightly different. So right now I'm looking at this cube and I'm seeing the front face and the top face. I don't see the sides, right? All I can see is the front. In this case, the first step is to draw a square that represents the front face of the cube. Let's do that. Sorry, trying to draw through my camera again. Okay. So make sure in this case that the width and the height are the same, so we have an actual square. And now I'm going to start measuring the angles going this way and this way. So let's do that. One angle's tapering like this, drop it down, mark off a spot, and there's the first angle. Now let's do the same thing for the other side. Drop it down, mark off a spot, and connect your dots. All right, so there is the top of the cube. Now we need to figure out where the cube ends. Is it back here, or is it closer? We're going to use our proportion measuring tool to measure from the back of the cube to the front of the cube and compare this distance against something we've already drawn, the height of the cube here. So now we're going to measure from the top. Tip of the pencil goes to the back of the cube. Thumbnail goes to the front of the cube here. And now I'm going to bring it down and compare it to the height. My thumbnail is right at the bottom of the cube. I'm looking up, seeing where the tip of my pencil is. It's right about there. It looks like it's about 1/3 of the way up. Right? Let's find that distance here. That's about 1/3 of the way up. Bring it up and put a little dot there. And now we've sketched in the cube. Right, so this is a cube directly from the front. This is the only situation where these angles are perfectly horizontal. Right? When you can see a little bit of the side, the angles are going to be slightly off horizontal on the larger side and they're really steep on the smaller side. This is the only case where the angles here are horizontal. Here's a diagram that will be available for you to download that reviews all the info we covered. I understand this is a complicated process, but there's a reason behind it. Precision is very important when drawing cubes, and even a slight mismeasurement here or there will make the cube look wrong. But why is it important to draw cubes? Well, look around you. The world is made of cubes. Buildings, chairs, tables. So knowing how to draw cubes well is the key to drawing more complex shapes. In fact, it even helps in drawing organic forms, because quite often they can be reduced down to cuboid shapes before you start adding your little organic details. This process takes time and practice to learn. The most important thing is to keep working on it, because I find that in most cases it's a skill that comes little by little as you get better at measuring angles, measuring proportions, but also as you become more sensitive to angles and proportions, more sensitive to actually seeing them. To that end, I'm going to give you images to work from in your in-class assignment. Please either download them and print them or work directly off the screen, and then upload them for feedback.